Today we're going to build a differential, and obviously the buggy has a front, a rear, and a center differential, and 98% of the components are exactly the same between them all, with a few minor discrepancies which I'd like to point out now. The first of which is the outdrives. The front and rear outdrives look very similar, except that one is slightly longer than the other. The long outdrives go on the front, the short outdrives go on the back. And then the center outdrives actually look completely different than the front or rear. So it's not hard to tell which ones go in the center differential. And then if you look at the ring gears, the front and the back use this style ring gear. They're exactly the same front to back. And then the center diff has this phenomenal. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started with the buildup of our front differential. So just to walk through the parts real quick, what you're going to need is you get your 2 outdrives, 2 bearings, 2 sun gears, 4 spider gears, 2 cross shafts, 2 locking pins, the diff housing, the ring gear, 4 fasteners to fasten it all up. Then you're going to have 4 shims like these here that have a large hole in the center that will fit over the outdrive shaft. And then you're going to have 4 shims with a small hole like so that are just big enough to go over the ends of these cross pins. So, then you got 2 larger O-rings that are kind of clear, so they're hard to see, and then 2 tiny little black O-rings, and then of course a gasket to button it all up. So, with that said, we're going to get started. The first thing you got to do is put these tiny little black O-rings on your outdrives. So, they need to be lubricated, and the way I usually do this is just put a little grease on my fingertips, or the tip of a finger, then kind of rub the O-ring around on my finger in the grease, and then you got to try and get it over the outdrive, which is not as easy as you would think. But you get it started, you're going to roll it down, and there's a groove in the shaft. You're going to roll it down into the groove. So there we go, we got that one in place. A little more grease. Lubricate the second O-ring a little bit. Alright. Roll it down onto the outdrive shaft so we can see it going on. Down into the groove. Now that those O-rings are on, take our housing. We're going to install a bearing on one end, like so. And then we're going to feed an outdrive in. And it takes a little effort to get it in. You don't want to be too rough with it because you don't want to damage the O-ring. So, shaft's in. Now we need to lubricate one of these bigger O-rings because it's going to go down into the body of the diff housing. So again, just kind of smear some grease around on it, and then you're going to drop it down into the housing over the end of the outdrive shaft. And then usually to get it to sit down, I just use my 90-degree needle nose to kind of tamp it down into the groove in the bottom of the diff housing. So now that's down in there, we need 2 shims with the large holes. We're going to go over the outdrive shaft. And again, 90-degree pliers to get it down in there. Our second one. Again, 90-degree pliers. Now for probably the most challenging step of the whole process, which really isn't that challenging, but you need to pick up a cross or a locking pin. I usually grab it in about the middle with the 90-degree pliers. And what you have to do is you've got to get it to go through that hole down in the bottom of the diff housing. So you got to kind of figure out where your hole's at. Might have to rotate it a little bit. There we go. And then you're going to drop it down in to be nice and centered, about halfway through the outdrive pin. So once you've got that, you take your first sun gear. To help it stay in place, I usually put just a dab of dab of grease into the corners of the gear. When you drop this down in there, that shaft's going to go in this groove or notch across the back face of the gear. So you kind of line it up with the pin, drop it down in there, you push it into place with your finger. That side is pretty much done. The next step is we need to build up a spider gear assembly. So you're going to take a cross shaft and you're going to put 2 gears on it, one from each side, facing each other, like so. Then you need to take 2 of the shims with the small hole and put one on behind each gear. So I'll put one in from this side, one in from this side. When you drop it into the housing, it's alright if everything's kind of bunched up to the middle. It doesn't really matter when you're dropping it in. So I take that, and then if you look down into the housing, you'll see that there's notches in the housing straight across from each other at 90 degrees. So it doesn't matter where you start, but you're going to drop the shaft down into some notches. And once it kind of goes down in the housing, then you're going to spread the gears out to the walls so that the shaft will go all the way down in, and your gears will mesh with the sun gear at the bottom. Then what you're going to want to do is take the pliers and kind of gently rotate the shaft until the cutout in the shaft is facing up. See the cutout in there? Because when we drop the second shaft in, that cutout will be facing down, and it'll lock into that one. So we got our first set in. I'm going to build up the second set of spider gears here. Need a shim on each side. Now with the second one, sometimes it saves a little bit of work if you can kind of look at your shaft and try and orient it before you drop it in, so that the groove is straight down when you drop it into the housing. So this one's got to be dropped in 90 degrees from the first one. So there we go. As it starts to go down in, you got to push your gears out to the sides. I did pretty good because I didn't have to rotate the second shaft at all. It dropped right down into the notch. And so there we are. Gears are all the way down in. If you kind of hold it down with your finger, turn the out drive, everything rotates nicely. So we'll set that aside. Now we've got to build up the ring gear end. Take your ring gear, install your bearing. We've already lubricated our O-ring and installed it on the out drive, so you're going to slip that in just like the other side. And now we need 2 shims. Whoops, I'm sorry, get ahead of myself, not the shims. Need to lubricate up the second big white clear O-ring. Drop it down over the out drive shaft. Now we can put a shim on top of it. And we can put a second shim on top of it. So with 2 shims down on top of the O-ring, go ahead and put our cross or locking pin in. This side's a lot easier than this side with it all buried down in the diff housing. Get it about centered, just like the other side. A little bit of grease, back of our gear. And we'll hold it into place. So there we go, ready to go. So at this point, we've got both halves built up. We just need to fill the diff with fluid. When I fill a diff, I usually start by putting a dab right here behind the gear. There's a little pocket behind the gear in the shaft at the end of each shaft. I usually start by putting a little blob down behind each gear, because usually you get air bubbles back there and they're hard to get out. So once I got a blob in each of those 4 spots, then I just go down in the corners between the gears. A little bit in each corner all the way around. And what we want to achieve here is we want, when we're done, the oil level to be just at the top of the gears. So if you're pretty much to the top of the gears, when you put the top on and that other sun gear goes down into the cavity, it's going to take up some volume. So you don't really want to fill it completely to the top, or a whole bunch is going to ooze out on you. So we're pretty good. We're up to the top of all the gears. So I'm going to take the gasket. I'm going to position it over so it's lined up with the holes, and I'm going to drop on my top, and I'm going to try and line up the holes before I drop it on, so that I don't want to have to turn it a lot. So pretty good fit. We're almost completely lined up. So there we have it. We got all our fasteners run down, and if you look, you've probably just seen the video, I just got a little bit of oil to ooze up out of this hole when I finally finished it down. This one here too. And that's the secret. That's how you know you had just the right amount of oil in it, when you get just a little bit to come up through the hole when you run it down. If it comes out everywhere, all around the base of the ring gear, then you overfilled it. Which really isn't a problem, other than it just makes a mess. So if you overfill it, it's not a big issue. It just means more is going to ooze out when you tighten it down. So So there you have it. That's the buildup of a differential. You want to give the outdrives a little bit of a twist. Make sure everything turns nice and smooth, which this one does, and then it's ready to go on your buggy. So hope it was helpful, hope you enjoyed it, and look for the rest of my videos. We'll be building up the front and rear gearboxes here soon.